My husband's card was declined at 7:42 a.m. He stood frozen in front of the cafe register, staring at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. I didn't rush to help. I just watched. What surprised me wasn't the decline. It was how calm I felt. If you're listening to this and thinking, that sounds cold, I understand. I would have thought the same thing once. But stay with me. By the end of this, you'll understand why silence was the loudest thing I could have chosen. This isn't a revenge story. It's a realization story. And it didn't start that morning. It started the night before. We were at a small rooftop bar downtown, the kind with uneven stools and string lights that pretend everything is warmer than it really is. His friends were there, co-workers mostly. Loud voices, expensive watches, jokes that land a second too late. I remember the smell of citrus cleaner and beer, and how I kept smoothing the hem of my dress even though it didn't need it. Someone asked what I did for Wyke. Before I could answer, my husband laughed. Not a big laugh, just enough to draw attention. Oh, she does her little projects, he said. It's more like a hobby than a real income. They laughed with him, not cruelly, casually, like it was obvious. I smiled. I even nodded, like he'd said something true. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain that my little projects paid for more than he realized. I just took a sip of my drink and let the moment pass. Inside, something settled. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. I looked at him differently after that. Not with hurt, with distance. Like I'd stepped half a foot back from my own life and was seeing it from the outside for the first time. He didn't notice. He never did, when it mattered. That night, we went home together. We brushed our teeth side by side. He scrolled on his phone. I tied my hair up. We said goodnight like always. He fell asleep in minutes. I stayed awake. I stayed at the ceiling and listened to his breathing, slow and confident, like someone who believed the ground beneath him was solid, like someone who didn't know it was about to shift. I didn't cry. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't make threats in my head. I just thought about money, about trust, about how easy it is to underestimate someone when you benefit from them staying small. The next morning, I woke up before him, made coffee, put on my jacket. He kissed my cheek and said he'd meet me later. At the cafe, his card declined. He laughed at first, embarrassed, tried again. Then he pulled out his phone, frowned, and checked our account. That's when his face changed. That's when he looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing a stranger sitting across the table. And still, I said nothing. If you're wondering why I didn't speak up that night at the bar, why I didn't warn him, why I chose quiet instead of confrontation, I promise there's a reason. And it has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with truth. Let me take you back to before any of this made sense. Before that night on the rooftop, my life felt settled. Not perfect, just stable in the way you trust without checking the locks twice. We had been married a little over 3 years, together for almost 7. Long enough that routines replaced surprises, and comfort quietly took the place of curiosity. We lived in a clean, modest apartment with white walls and too many throw pillows we never used. Every Sunday morning, we grocery shopped together. Every Wednesday night, we ordered takeout from the same Thai place because neither of us wanted to cook midweek. It wasn't exciting, but it felt reliable. And I believed in reliable. My husband was confident in a way that used to make me feel safe. He spoke easily, took up space naturally. People listened when he talked. I admired that about him, how sure he was of his place in the world. I thought his certainty balanced my tendency to overthink. I worked from home. Always had. My income came from multiple streams, consulting, digital contracts, long-term clients I'd built quietly over years. It wasn't flashy. No office. No title that impressed strangers. But it was steady. And it was mine. We had one shared account. Bills, savings, daily expenses, all together. It felt symbolic at the time. Like trust made visible. He never asked much about my work. I didn't think that was strange. He'd say things like, as long as you're happy, or You're lucky you don't have to deal with office politics. I heard those words as support. Looking back, I hate distance. Most evenings, we sat on opposite ends of the couch. He watched sports highlights or scrolled through work emails. I read or answered client messages. Sometimes our feet touched. Sometimes they didn't. We talked about plans, vacations we might take, houses we might buy someday. Always someday. I believed we were building towards something together. Internally, I felt proud of what I'd created. Quietly proud. I didn't broadcast it. I didn't correct people when they assumed I just freelanced a bit. I didn't need applause. I thought security was enough. And emotionally, I felt chosen. I felt like someone had seen me, known me, and stayed. That's why the warning signs were so easy to dismiss. The first one was subtle. Almost nothing. We were at a dinner party months before the rooftop bar. Someone asked about finances, in that awkward, half-joking way people do when wine loosens their boundaries. My husband answered for both of us. I handle most of that stuff, he said. Emily's work is more flexible. He smiled when he said it. I smiled too, but something in my chest tightened, just for a second. I told myself I was being sensitive. Another time, I noticed he'd stopped including me in conversations about money altogether. He talked about his salary, his bonus, his stress. Never ours, never mine. I told myself he was just venting. Then there was the pause. The pause happened whenever someone asked me directly what I did. He'd glance at me first. Not rudely, just quickly, like he was checking what version of myself I planned to present. That pause should have mattered more. But when you love someone, you don't assume malice. You assume misunderstanding. You assume it's fixable. You assume you're safe enough to wait. And so I waited. Now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because at that stage, nothing had broken yet. There were no accusations, no fights, no obvious lies, just small moments that didn't quite fit together. And one man who was very comfortable believing he carried more weight than he actually did. The first real crack didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a notification. I was at my desk one afternoon, halfway through a client call, when my phone buzzed beside my keyboard. I didn't look at it right away. I finished my sentence, muted myself, and then glanced down. It was a banking alert. At first, I assumed it was routine, a payment, a transfer, something automatic. But the amount caught my eye, larger than usual, and the label wasn't one I recognized. I frowned, unmuted myself, finished the call, and then opened the app. It took a second to load, long enough for my pulse to pick up, just slightly. When the screen refreshed, I saw a transfer I hadn't made, a significant one, from our shared savings into his personal account. No note, no explanation. I stayed at it longer than I needed to, not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because I was trying to understand why. He'd never moved money without telling me before. We weren't the kind of couple who tracked every dollar, but we always communicated. Or at least, I thought we did. I closed the app. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe he meant to tell me later. Maybe it was for something practical, a work expense, a short-time thing. Still, something had shifted. That quiet sense of unease I'd been ignoring finally had a shape. That night, I watched him more closely than usual. The way he spoke. The way he avoided certain topics. He talked about his job a lot, deadlines, meetings, pressure. He didn't mention the transfer. At one point, I almost asked. The words were right there, sitting at the back of my throat. Instead, I waited, because part of me wanted to see what he would do if I didn't prompt him. Whether honesty was something he offered freely, or only when cornered. Days passed. The money didn't come back. Another alert followed. Smaller this time. Still unexplained. I checked our account less like a partner and more like an observer. I noticed patterns, timing, amounts, the fact that the transfers always happened when he thought I was busy. I didn't confront him. Not yet. What I did do was start paying closer attention to my own records, my income, my contributions, how much of our lifestyle was actually supported by my little projects. The numbers didn't lie. They never do. More than half of our shared savings came from me. Not recently, consistently, month after month, year after year. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me quiet. I started replaying old conversations in my head. His jokes, his comments, the way he spoke about money when other people were around, the way he laughed that night on the rooftop. And for the first time, I wondered if it wasn't just carelessness. What if he genuinely believed what he was saying? The thought settled heavy in my chest. A week later, he mentioned needing some flexibility with finances. He said it casually, like it was already agreed upon. I might move things around for a bit, he said. Just temporary. I nodded. I asked no questions. Inside, I made a decision, not a dramatic one. Just a small, quiet shift. If he was going to move in silence, I would listen in silence. If he thought I didn't understand the weight of money, I would let him keep believing that. Because sometimes the clearest truth shows itself when you stop interrupting. Pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him right then, or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. At that point, I still didn't know how far this would go. I didn't know what I would find. But I knew one thing for sure. The version of my marriage I believed in no longer existed, and I was finally ready to see what was underneath. I didn't uncover the truth all at once. It came in pieces. Small, sharp pieces that cut deeper the more I held them. The first was an email. I wasn't snooping. That matters to me. I wasn't digging through his phone or guessing passwords. I was on our shared laptop, looking for a document we both used for taxes. His email was still open from earlier that morning. A preview line caught my eye before I could stop myself. Just confirming the transfer went through. I froze. I told myself not to read it. That this was the line you don't cross if you want to believe you're still married to the person you think you are. I clicked anyway. It wasn't an affair email. In some ways, that almost made it worse. It was a conversation between him and a financial advisor I had never heard of. Not ours. His. The language was confident, strategic, detached. Discussions about reallocating assets, minimizing exposure, creating independence. Independence from what? From me. I scrolled slowly, my hand steady in a way that surprised me. The messages went back months. Quiet planning, quiet certainty. He wasn't confused. He wasn't reacting. He was preparing for a future that didn't include transparency or partnership. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. Long enough that the room felt unfamiliar. Like I'd walked into someone else's life and realized I didn't recognize the furniture. That night, I slept beside him and felt like I was sharing a bed with a stranger. The next piece came a few days later. A credit report. I requested it without telling him. Not because I wanted leverage, but because I needed reality. What I found made my stomach drop. There were accounts I didn't know about. Cards opened in his name. Yes, but tied to our shared address. Debts I'd never seen statements for. Payments that had come, indirectly, from our joint funds. From my money. He wasn't just moving things around. He was using my income as a safety net while publicly diminishing its value. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not emotionally, but structurally. Like a belief snapping under weight. I replayed that rooftop night again. His laugh, his tone, the way he dismissed my work with a sentence that made everyone comfortable laughing along. It wasn't accidental. It was rehearsed. Midway through this unraveling, I need you to understand something. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life collapsing. Have you ever been blindsided like this? If you've been there, share your story below. We healed better together. The final piece came quietly, almost cruelly so. I asked him a simple question over dinner. Casual, neutral. Do you ever worry about money? He didn't hesitate. No, he said. I've got it handled. Not we. I. That pronoun did more damage than any document ever could. I nodded. I took another bite of food. I didn't ask what handled meant. I didn't ask why he'd never mentioned the advisor, or the accounts, or the transfers, because by then, the picture was clear. He didn't see me as an equal contributor. He saw me as a resource, reliable, quiet, underestimated. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened my own records. Every invoice, every deposit. Every month I'd carried more than my share without ever asking for recognition. I added the numbers carefully, and then I stopped, because the pain didn't come from realizing how much I'd given. It came from realizing how little he respected it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, feeling something I'd never felt before in our marriage. Not grief, not anger, displacement. Like I was standing in a place that used to be home, and suddenly understood it never really was. That was my lowest point, not because I felt powerless, but because I realized I'd been powerful all along, and chosen to be invisible. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. Everything after that became a matter of choice. The morning after everything finally settled into place, I didn't wake up angry. I woke up clear. There's a difference, and if you've ever felt it, you know exactly what I mean. Anger is loud. Clarity is quiet. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand anything. It just stands there and waits for you to catch up. I made coffee. I opened the blinds. I listened to the city wake up. My husband moved around the apartment like he always did, confident, unaware, certain of the ground beneath his feet. And I stopped trying to protect him from the truth. That was my turning point. I didn't decide to hurt him. I decided to stop holding the structure together alone. For years, I'd smoothed things over emotionally and financially. I paid more than I spoke about. I adjusted without being asked. I let him believe the story that made him comfortable. No more. The first thing I did was separate what was mine. Quietly, legally, precisely. I spoke to a financial professional, one I chose. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I asked questions. I brought documentation. I learned exactly where I stood and what I was entitled to. Knowledge is stabilizing in a way reassurance never is. I opened a new account. I redirected my income. Every client payment that had been flowing into our shared life now flowed somewhere else. Not to hide it, but to protect it. I didn't empty anything. I didn't touch what wasn't mine. I just stopped over-contributing. Emotionally, that was harder than the logistics. There were moments when I almost backed out, moments when he smiled at me the way he always had, or asked if I wanted to plan a weekend away. Habit is powerful. So is hope. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of the emails, the credit lines, the way he'd laughed. This wasn't impulsive. It was corrective. At night, I lay awake thinking about who I'd been when I married him. Younger, softer, eager to be chosen. I didn't blame her. She did the best she could with what she knew. But I wasn't her anymore. I practiced what I would say if he asked questions. Neutral answers. Calm tones. No emotion he could twist into defensiveness. I didn't want to fight. I wanted balance. The last step was the hardest, not because it was complicated, but because it was symbolic. I removed my automatic contributions to the shared savings. Nothing dramatic happened in that moment. No alarms, no notifications he noticed right away. Just a shift. For the first time since we'd joined our finances, the system reflected reality instead of illusion. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn him. I let time do what time does best, reveal patterns. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. I wasn't plotting humiliation. I wasn't setting a trap. I was stepping back and letting the consequences of his assumptions meet him without my interference. And when you stop compensating for someone else's blind spots, things fall apart very quickly. The night before the cafe incident, I slept better than I had in months. Not because I felt safe, because I felt prepared. Whatever came next wouldn't be chaos. It would be exposure. The cafe was loud in the way mornings usually are. grinders humming, cups clinking, conversations overlapping without listening. We stood in line together. He ordered first. Confident. Casual. The same man who had laughed the night before. The barista smiled and rang him up. He tapped his card. Declined. He laughed, half turning toward me like it was a joke we shared. Tried again. Declined. The sound was small. Polite. Final. His smile faded. He pulled the card out, frowned at it, swiped again, harder this time, like pressure could change reality. Declined. People behind us shifted. Someone cleared their throat. The barista glanced at me, then back at him. "Do you want to try another payment method?" she asked. His phone was already in his hand. He stepped aside, thumbs moving fast, jaw tight. I could see the moment his confidence cracked, not shattered, just fractured enough to let panic through. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. He opened our shared account. I watched his face change in stages. Confusion. Calculation. Fear. He looked up at me then. Really looked. "What did you do?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I didn't do anything," I said. And that was true. He scrolled again, faster now. The color drained from his face. "You moved money," he said. "I moved my income," I replied. Calm. Even. Around us, life kept going. Orders called. Milk steamed. A couple laughed at a corner table. He lowered his voice. "You should have told me." I met his eyes. "You didn't tell me either." Silence settled between us, not dramatic, just heavy. "This is serious," he said. "I handle our finances." That word again. I took a breath. Not to steady myself. I was steady. To choose my words carefully. "No," I said. "You handle your finances." I was supporting a system you stopped respecting. His mouth opened. Closed. He looked around like someone waiting for backup that wasn't coming. Midway through this moment, "I need to ask you, are you rooting for me right now, or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it." We paid separately. I used my card. It worked. We walked out into the morning air without touching. Outside, he finally raised his voice, just slightly. "You embarrass me." I stopped walking. "I stayed quiet when you embarrassed me," I said. "This is just math catching up." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the language anymore. "You can't just do this," he said. "I can," I replied. And I did. There was no shouting, no tears, just two people standing on opposite sides of a truth that had been a long time coming. That was the moment everything changed. Not because he panicked, but because I didn't. After the cafe, things didn't explode the way people expect them to. They thinned. That's the best word I have for it. Our apartment felt larger, but emptier, like sound didn't carry the same way anymore. We spoke, but only when necessary. Logistics, schedules, polite questions that didn't invite real answers. He was careful after that. Almost gentle. He asked before spending. He mentioned money in a way that sounded like humility, but felt more like fear. I noticed something else too. He stopped joking about my work. Not because he suddenly respected it, but because he finally understood it mattered. We had conversations then. Long ones. Late at night. He apologized, in the way people do when they are cornered by consequences instead of empathy. He said he'd felt pressure, that he hadn't meant to diminish me, that he thought I didn't mind. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue, because I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. Trust doesn't break loudly. It erodes. And once it's gone, you can't negotiate it back into place. I stayed in the apartment for a while. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted my decision to come from clarity, not adrenaline. I needed to see who he was when he wasn't in control. What I saw wasn't cruelty. It was entitlement. And that was harder to forgive. Eventually, I moved my things into a smaller place across town. Nothing dramatic. No ultimatums. Just a quiet separation that matched the way everything else had unfolded. We didn't fight about money after that. There was nothing left to argue over. What surprised me most was what remained. My routines. my work, my sense of self. I hadn't lost myself in the marriage. I'd just been editing myself down to fit someone else's comfort. Once I stopped doing that, I realized how intact I still was. Midway through looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. Some nights were lonely. Healing isn't glamorous. It's quiet and repetitive and often boring. But it was honest. I rebuilt slowly, on my own terms. I trusted myself more than I trusted explanations. He tried to stay in touch. Messages softened over time. Regret has a way of doing that. I wished him well, genuinely, but from a distance. Because peace isn't about winning. It's about not needing to explain why you left. By the time the paperwork was finished, the story felt complete. Not neat, but whole. And for the first time in a long time, my life felt like it belonged to me again. If you've stayed with me this long, then you already know this story was never really about money. Money was just the language the truth chose to speak in. What hurt wasn't that my husband underestimated my income. It was that he underestimated me, my awareness, my contribution, my right to stand on equal ground in my own life. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. There's a quiet kind of betrayal that doesn't involve cheating or shouting or slam doors. It lives in assumptions, in entitlement, in the way someone benefits from your strength while convincing themselves they are the one holding everything together. If you're in a place like that right now, I want you to hear this clearly. Noticing doesn't make you cruel. Protecting yourself doesn't make you selfish. And choosing silence when it's intentional and grounded can be an act of strength, not weakness. I didn't leave to punish him. I left because I finally respected myself enough to stop shrinking. And here's my final question. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily Parker's voice travels. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight. It's to quietly step into your full worth and never step back.